Hey everyone, welcome to another discussion around flexible working with me, David Leach from Yflex. So at Yflex, we are aiming to create a community where we can share experiences around flexible working and remote working, and where we can help others to embrace and get the benefits from flexible working. Last 11 months have been pretty interesting for a lot of us with the vaccine rollout and the government's plan now in place for how we potentially go back to something nearer to normal. It's now interesting for teams and organizations to consider what the future might look like, whether that's snapping back to normal or staying remote or something in between. So really pleased today to be talking to Stephen Janaway from Bloom and Wild. And yeah, Stephen, if you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll just go through a few questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, hi. I'm Steve. I'm VP Engineering for Bloom and Wild. So I look after our engineering team. It's 36 people strong now. It's grown quite a lot during the lockdown and during the pandemic. In fact, the company's grown quite a lot during the lockdown and the pandemic as well. So yeah, we're a rapidly scaling part of the business, which comes with its challenges, but it's a bit of fun.
Welcome, Steve. Thanks for your time today. Yeah, we'll dig into some of your growth plans in a second. So yeah, I've got a few questions as we go through, just to prompt discussion. There'll be a bit of a catch-all at the end, so anything we don't talk about you think will be interesting for other people and companies to bear in mind, then please mention that at the end. So cool. First question, just to kick us off, what's been your biggest challenge personally during the pandemic?
So I guess keeping the team together has been a big challenge. At the beginning, it was fine. Everyone was like really excited. It was like working. I've got an engineering team, and one of the things an engineering team finds hard is open plan offices and not being able to really get in focus time. And so at the beginning, everyone was super happy. They were suddenly getting huge amounts of focus time. But as things have gone on, I think it's trying to keep that motivation up and trying to keep people connected when they've got so many other kind of macro level outside of work challenges, and kind of that background level of stress for everyone has been much higher. Then yeah, that I think has been the biggest challenge. We've hired a bunch of folks during lockdown. In fact, the company's grown by more than 50% since lockdown started. So we have an interesting challenge, which I think we'll come on to later, which is we have an office which is no longer big enough to put all the people who work for Bloom and Wild into. Engineering has been a fair part of that hiring. So we've got folks who've come in, and I've got an entire management team, so 3 engineering managers below me. I've met none of them face to face ever. so kind of building those relationships has been it's been interesting. It's certainly been interesting. But yeah, I'd say motivation, keeping that motivation up has been the biggest challenge for us.
Absolutely. All right, thanks, Steve. Next one is, what's been the biggest change in your role?
Change in my role? God, that's a good question. I guess a lot of them. I manage engineering managers. Engineering managers manage my team, but I think for me, it's been moving that kind of managerial role. It becomes more about coaching, and it becomes more about kind of consistent understanding through perhaps goal setting or some other framework or method. It becomes so much more important when you're remote, and when you can't kind of see people, you can't pick up on little kind of challenges as you kind of go through stuff. I think it's an area where we hadn't really had to focus on any of that too much, because we'd grown from being, I've been at Bloom and Wild 3.5 years now, and so I've kind of seen us grow from sort of 40 people in the whole company up to about 100 when lockdown started. And so we didn't need to focus on kind of a lot of that stuff quite so much, because we were still a close-knit unit. We were of the sort of size where you had personal relationships with everybody, and you knew everybody, and therefore consequently it was still pretty gelled. Whereas obviously now it's not, and it's been increasingly important for me as well, because as I mentioned before, bringing in an entire management layer during remotely, and then getting those folks up to speed and getting them bought into what we're trying to do, so that they can do that for their squads, for their teams, you've got to have absolute kind of razor sharp clarity when you do that. Ambiguity, it's so much harder. Ambiguity is so much harder when everybody's apart, because you've got, well, I guess you've got longer to, as an individual, you've got longer to dwell on that ambiguity, and then you're going to anchor on the thing that you think is the way forwards, and that may not be the correct direction. So that's been super challenging. I guess you said biggest change or change, but I think the one that a lot of people, myself included, have found difficult has been around that balancing the right communication medium. And actually, we're like a lot of companies. We've always been like really heavy Slack users, and balancing Slack versus a video call versus true asynchronous communication has been something we've really tried to focus on through this year. Probably a little too late. A lot of it was in the kind of in terms of responding to feedback that people were feeling completely burnt out, and they were in like video call after video call after video call. But it kind of feels like we've got to a little bit of a better place there. I think it's one of the maybe it's I bet you're going to ask me at some point about kind of some of the things we've changed. So maybe I'll be quiet and wait till you ask the actual question.
That's fine. So yeah, just let it flow, I suppose. So I guess getting that feedback from people has been important. And people feeling like that things are changing now, and kind of the energy's back. They're not feeling quite so burnt out.
If you were asking me that question and it wasn't February, then I'd say probably yes. I mean, we're a flower gifting company, and so consequently, our busiest periods of the year are Christmas, Valentine's Day, and Mother's Day, and so we are in a period where everything is a little bit busier anyway. But yeah, I think kind of generally speaking, I mean, we've done a lot to listen to people. So in terms of asking them what they want, we do a regular EMPS survey, and we do our own kind of focused health check. So kind of it's based very heavily on the Spotify health check model. We use that within the engineering team. So we've focused very much on making sure that we are dealing with the specific kind of flexible remote working challenges and feedback that we've been getting from that. We're very lucky that we have an organization that thinks this stuff is important and invests in it. So I mean, even just kind of silly stuff. So we're kind of running up to Valentine's Day. The week before Valentine's Day is really, really busy. So everyone in the company got sent a meal kit, whichever meal kit they wanted for one evening, just so that they wouldn't have to cook for a particular evening. Yeah. And we normally do that in the office. So we normally get food in and make a big deal of the fact we're getting food in. So it's an example of something that we've managed to take and kind of make remote. It's not kind of perfect, and it's not a complete replacement for the office-based thing, but it shows that you kind of as a company you care, and I think that's the important thing, and it kind of glues folks back to us as a company. So we've been trying to do a lot more of that, which I think has been super important. As I mentioned before, we've done a bunch of work around communication, and so there's been kind of multiple strands to that. I mean, one of them is making it okay for people to switch off. Where at the end of the day, you switch off. So when I say making it okay, I mean that's messaging and living those values as a senior leadership team, and our CEO saying, look, it's 5 o'clock on a Thursday, stop working, please. And then investing in technology, simple stuff like sort of scheduled send in Gmail, or we've integrated a message scheduler into Slack, and we regularly remind people how they can use it so that they can effectively stop interrupting people out of hours, even if they didn't mean to. So kind of all meant very, very kind of positively. And then we have focused on, as I mentioned before, around kind of communication, making sure we're clear on asynchronous communication and pure asynchronous communication. So I mean, one example, I've shifted my leadership team to start using a much more proposal driven format for our meetings. So if you want to talk about something, you write it up in a Google Doc beforehand, like a day or two beforehand, you share that with everybody comments on it, and then effectively we're using that FaceTime to make the decision and not to talk about the thing. So we're not wasting people's time, we're not forcing them to video calls, but we're also saying, you need some time to think about this. Here's your time to think about it, comment in a document. We've also then got a paper trail, which is super, super important when you're remote. And yeah, it's just, I think it makes it easier for folks. I think that's the important thing. That's what we've got to do at the moment. We've got to make it as easy to be part of a team and feel like, make it feel like we kind of care about people.
Yeah, no, I like that. You're leading by example, and you're using technology to sort of further confirm the way that you should be working with each other and how decisions get made. So I like that. That's good. I guess some of this has been covered. So just as we go through some of these, just anything in addition you'd like to add. So as you mentioned, you're growing. New people have come in, joined the company. Has that changed your kind of approach to flexible working? You mentioned the office capacity, and I suppose otherwise outside of the pandemic, you'd have had some limitations, I suppose, on how many people you could bring into the company and how soon. But I guess how's your approach to flexible working now? What are you thinking with growth plans as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. We came to a conclusion reasonably early in lockdown that this was going to last for a decent amount of time, and it was the right time to adapt our kind of recruitment expectations and our hiring policies. So we needed, it was useful to have some data that said the engineering team can work really effectively when they're remote. So that's one of my positives from this current situation is I've managed to prove that we work effectively as a unit when we're remote, caveated heavily with, I know we're all remote, and that's probably going to get harder when we start drifting back to the office. But so we've changed our hiring processes. So we used to be your bum needs to be on a seat in London unless your manager says otherwise, which effectively meant you're waiting in for a delivery or something like that. We used to be a bit flexible on that because it was like, obviously, I really want to get this work done. I need to think about it. I need an uninterrupted block. Go and work from home then. But that was very much the exception, not the rule. Whereas now our hiring policy effectively says if you can work plus or minus 2 hours GMT in Europe, then we'll hire you. So effectively, we're now open and we have hired folks who are 100% remote, which we'd not done before. That then with it came then a whole discussion around things like how do we onboard those people? How do we compensate those people fairly? And so we've invested in a better onboarding process. We have a bunch of different Trello boards that people can then again use asynchronously to work through their onboarding, rather because trying to replicate effectively, you can't sit somebody down by somebody else at the moment because they're not going to sit in a video call for 8 hours a day. So, but then we've looked at remote compensation. We've adapted our entire remote we built a remote compensation model. We didn't have one before, so we built a remote compensation model to make sure that we're actually compensating those people that are fully remote fairly. But then what we're looking at now, because we know there's an end in sight here, and so we're going to come back to our office is going to be available, I think is the key point, is what do things look like when the office is available? So we're looking at, we're not looking at changing offices, for example. We're effectively looking at flipping our previous model, which was in the office unless your manager says not, to at home unless your manager says please come to the office. Yep. And there's a whole bunch of subtleties to that we're working through at the moment, because obviously there's still only a certain amount of space in the office, and therefore consequently if every manager without talking to each other says please come to the office on a Wednesday, then we're going to have a problem. But that's effectively we're going to move to a more hybrid model. I think we just, as I say, we're planning stuff out at the moment because there's pros and cons to a hybrid model. I've done a lot of reading on the there's a lot of folks that will say hybrid models don't work. There's lots of folks that say hybrid models do work. Quite a few of the folks I've seen who say they don't work tend to work for fully remote companies. I don't know which one follows which, but we're going to try and make a hybrid model work across the whole company. So this isn't just engineering. This is a Bloom and Wild change, a Bloom and Wild wide change.
Yeah, easy for you to say.
Yeah,
and I suppose it becomes an extra facet to most companies' culture that hasn't been there before. I think the remote working, is it Elisette Sutherland? I think there's been a big proponent for, we can be productive and effective working remote the whole time, but it's not for everybody. So, it's another element for everybody to consider when joining a company.
The last time I went to our office was in fact it was actually the day I met Lisette Sutherland. So I went into our office and then went to QCon and met her at QCon because I've had a book for about a year. It's great if you're thinking about remote working or you're thinking about moving to remote. I'd really recommend it. The book's great. But I saw her speak at QCon, and then it turned out that 2 people tested positive at QCon for COVID, and I wasn't allowed back in the office, and I haven't been back since. that was almost a year ago.
Makes what she's been discussing for the last few years very, very relevant in a way she probably never expected. But, it's good that knowledge is out there.
Yeah, but as I say, if you buy one book on remote working, I really recommend it. It's not a book to read from cover to cover. It's a book to dip in and out of and get kind of add different things to your toolbox.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thanks, Steve. I think we've probably just covered this, haven't we? This looking at the reward and recognition policies that you've got. Well, I guess on the recognition side.
Yeah, I think there's base compensation, and then there's what we internally would call delighting. So effectively, what tools do we give our managers, or do we use in the business to help people to make people feel good? So to kind of like micro rewards, and we've effectively increased the amount of surprises that people get through the door, which I think has been kind of really nice. And just in terms of just things like, I don't know, like Halloween chocolates at Halloween, or as I mentioned before, kind of like we'll buy you dinner and stuff like that. I think those things are really important because they kind of glue folks back to the company, and therefore you don't drift.
Yeah.
Equally, as I say, we've looked at remote compensation. We're also we're in the process of rolling out a more culture of more continuous feedback and making and tooling to support that. So we're using Lattice to support that, because we think that's increasingly important as companies are remote. It's a lot harder or it feels like a bigger hurdle to jump over for somebody to contact somebody else's manager in a call and give a little bit of verbal feedback on somebody, versus, I don't know, you might bump into them in the lift and you might just casually go, oh yeah, I saw you were working with this person, how are they doing, sort of thing. So we're trying to build that out. I mean, I think building a feedback culture is not something you do overnight. It's got a slow burn on it, but it's something that I think is really, really important when you've got a hybrid or indeed a fully remote organizational model.
Yeah, and that's really, like I said, really important, because now more than ever you're going to get to, some companies still have the annual appraisal approach, and but every day, every week feels like a month. So you're going to get to the end of the year and think, what did I do, and who did I work with, and how did it go? So capturing that as you go and getting those little boosts, or if it's constructive feedback, then getting that as you go along. That's great. What was the tool you mentioned? Sorry.
It's two. So we're using a tool called Lattice, but we've also got our own kind of internal tooling. We've built a Slack bot and an associated. So we had this before the remote working, but it's really transitioned nicely to remote working. So effectively, somebody you can call anyone out in a values recognition for something they've done that aligns with one of our 5 core values, and it would then stick that into a Slack channel so everyone else can see it. So that's kind of nice, because again, you see I don't know, somebody's recognized for this, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that person. I haven't seen them for like 10 months. Oh, I remember that. Oh, they've done that. They're doing that. And then what we do is every monthly meeting we have a vote, and we basically pick the top 5, and the whole company votes on effectively who's the monthly values winner. They get a prize and stuff like that. So we were doing that beforehand, but that's actually really transitioned really nicely to the remote model as well.
Yeah. Oh, really good. And it does tell us nicely at all different levels there. That was, really interesting. All right, thanks, Dave. Again, we've just talked a lot about this as well. There's quite a few digital tools you're using there, as you say, that have transitioned to remote working. Is there any other tools that you've not mentioned that are working well?
I've recently learned how to use Miro, and it's changed my life. So Miro is I would very much recommend Miro. I think a lot of the tooling we were using we were already using kind of remote friendly tooling. So we've always been very, I guess, we've always used SaaS products, and so a lot of our heavy Slack users, a lot of use of things like Trello, for example, and the kind of full set of G Suite bits and pieces. We went through multiple iterations of which retro tool shall we use now that we're all remote. I think all the squads went through different ones. They all anchored on different things. I think the last time I was doing retros in a squad, which admittedly was sort of 6 months ago before I'd hired some more engineering managers, we'd ended up mostly using Trello with a few little plugins and stuff like that. So I think we reasonably rapidly adapted to stuff like that. I think it helps. It's an engineering team, so it's people that we're pretty technology savvy anyway. So that's not been a kind of too much of a big deal. I think it's been quite easy. But yeah, Miro has been the big one, because it's the visualization piece that I think that's the thing I've personally really missed about in the last year, has been I can't go and stick a Post-it note on a whiteboard with a bunch of other folks in the room. And yeah, it's only been in the last sort of like 4 or 5 weeks where I thought, okay, actually I can use Miro for this. It's not the same, but it's good enough, and it kind of almost it replicates it a little bit. So yeah, we're probably in the process of spending huge amounts of money on Miro, I would imagine. I don't think it's a particularly cheap tool, but it's really nice productivity uplift, I think. Good.
Yeah, I think most people I've heard of that have used Miro or Mural, the price is probably doubled and tripled as soon as we went remote, but they are good tools and people are benefiting from them. So it's the price you pay. No, good use of Miro. Okay, that's good. Thanks, Steve. Again, I think we've probably alluded to this. I think we talked about the fact that you've probably flipped it so that you're at home, and then if you do need to go into the office to collaborate, then you will do so. I think a lot of people have talked about on-site being the new off-site, but have you had any discussions around the office space itself? Will you change layouts or use of technology within the office, or is it too early?
We're beginning to have those conversations now. So we've had we've had conversations around technology. So we know we need to, for example, install far better video conferencing facilities and make it as easy as possible for people to connect with those that are remote. And that's really important to me, because I think the thing I fear 2 things at the moment in terms of coming back to the office. Number one, hybrid model is not the same as a fully remote model, and just because we can all work fully remotely effectively because we're all in the same boat, that's not going to be the case when we're in a hybrid model. And so one way we can make that easier is by making sure that we've invested in as much technology as possible that breaks down that barrier between people that are in the room and people that are not physically in the room. Equally, I can see us moving to very much a model, but whereby if one person isn't in the room, nobody's in the room. So I think, from an IT perspective, there's obviously an implication on things like Wi-Fi availability and stuff like that. But those are quite easy things. we're just starting to have the conversation about what does the office look like in this model, because I've read a lot around the kind of people speculating that offices will start to become almost a little bit more like cafes and drop-ins, and effectively areas optimized for collaboration rather than optimized for my desk is over there and has been over there for the last 2 years and it's got my picture on it and my plant on it. And I think we are going to need to adapt, but it's very, very early days, I think, for us in terms of figuring out how to adapt. We're not even sure when we get to the point where people could come back to the office, how many people are going to come back to the office. So I think that's we're data gathering, I think, at the moment, which I think is okay. I think we've got enough time to deal with it. We're not going to rip out our entire office and completely change it, frankly, but I think we will end up reorganizing elements of it and kind of refocusing certain parts so it does support more of I dropped in on a Wednesday and somebody else came in on a Thursday sort of approach.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and again, the pondering if one person is remote, then you're all remote, and just establishing some thought patterns like that, I suppose, is going to be helpful. Just so people know what to expect.
I think that has a knock-on impact to things like office space and how an office is organized, because even just selfishly, I was like, if I'm sitting on a bank of desks and there are 7 other people who are all in the same call on headphones with, I don't know, 5 other people that are in various different locations, that's going to be really great for those, or it's going to be okay for those people that are in the call. It's going to be very, very disruptive for me. So how are we going to take what was a very open plan office with a few meeting rooms and reconfigure that so it's usable both for people in that scenario, that kind of hybrid scenario, but also it's usable for people that do want to collaborate face to face and frankly have only traveled into central London in order to collaborate face to face. So it kind of needs to be 2 things. I think I won't speculate how we're going to do that because we haven't really thought about it, but I think I can see different zones of usage zones effectively.
It's fascinating. I feel certainly in the last few weeks we're going from a place where we've had to take on a lot of stress and anxiety, and we're now moving to a place where it's just we've got some very different challenges and problems to solve, but in a positive way, because it's affecting how we work together and how people feel. That's good. All right. And yeah, I think that was just final thoughts now. Anything you've covered an awful lot in a short amount of time, across sort of tools, technology, people, culture, office space, strategy. Anything else that we haven't covered that you think would be useful for people to think about when considering flexible working in the future?
I read a really interesting article. I think Bruce Daisley, I hope I pronounced his name right there, shared in his newsletter, the Make Work Better newsletter this week, which is around making sure that we don't end up with people who are working remotely feeling like second-class citizens, or more specifically, we end up with cultures which value presenteeism in an office. And I think that's really, really important. I mean, I'm confident we aren't going to be like that in Bloom and Wild, because if we were going to be like that, we wouldn't be having conversations around flipping our model round. We'd just be saying, oh yeah, we'd just be slightly resigned to the fact more people might be working from home because they moved away during the pandemic or whatever, because we're making a conscious effort to flip this. I'm not so concerned about that for us, but I think it's a really, really good point that if we start valuing the people that come to the office, then that's a hybrid model really, really broken for me. And so I think it's really, really important to be aware of that. If we're gonna if we say to people, well, you can work from home, then we've got to mean it.
Yep. Yeah. Again, I guess there's a human bias towards the bond that you form with the person sat next to you and the person that you can see, and the person that you can't see. But you're right; those biases have got to be more conscious and talked about. So yeah, fascinating problems for us to solve on a human and a cultural level.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Steve. That was there's an awful lot in there.
Yeah, no worries at all.
As I say, we're trying to just share experiences and help us all on this. What's going to be probably another interesting 11 months as we well, I don't think we're going to snap back to normal, but as we bear in mind what I don't like the phrase new normal, but I suppose it is an accurate one. But yeah,
well,
yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, it's an evolution ultimately, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
That's yeah. I know. I think that's the way to view it. But also, we shouldn't forget the fact that obviously every year, once all lockdowns are done and everyone can go back to the office, everyone's just going to go a bit crazy anyway, aren't they? So, and half the people are going to be on holiday, so it won't be a problem.
It's true. Everyone's flying off abroad. I'm not sure that's sensible yet, but yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Thank you for your time, Steve. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. No worries at all.
Thank you so much. Speak to you soon.